If you haven't heard, there's big news in the Leica world. Has the Leica Q line and the famous Leica M line finally converged in the new EV1? Or is it something completely different? Let's talk about it. So this has been a rumor for a long time, this potential merging of the famous M11 with the rangefinder and the Q camera with its electronic viewfinder. And of course it has big implications, right? The rangefinder is the heart and soul of Leica. The Q represents this kind of easier line and easier point of entry into the Leica world. So this rumor's been around and people have been wondering what's going to happen. Well, this release just came a couple days ago, and what we're seeing is really an M11 with an electronic viewfinder. So they've just taken out the rangefinder and put in an electronic viewfinder. It seems the rest of the M11 remains the same. So why do this? It's a very interesting question. And it seems that Leica thinks there must be a substantial amount of people out there who just don't want the challenge of the rangefinder. And I get it. The rangefinder, it's tough to use. You know, it's a little focus patch. It's hard to see. You have to deal and understand with all these frame lines in the viewfinder. If you haven't been doing it for a long time, then it's a little bit of a challenge. So I get why people would want to bypass the rangefinder. And the EV1 now really gives you what you see is what you get. You look through the electric viewfinder and you're seeing what you would normally be seeing in the lens and what you're going to be shooting. So it portrays everything. You don't have to deal with those rangefinder lines, right? Whatever lens you put on there is going to change the actual aspect and the view of what you're seeing. So there's no messing with any of that. And now, you know, frankly, if you want to do that same function, you would put a VisiFlex outside viewfinder on the top of the M11, or you would take a picture and look at the screen and zoom in and see if you're in focus and see if you've got the proper capture of the proper range lines. So if you're not super comfortable with a rangefinder, this is a great way for somebody to get into the M11. And the rest of the camera's an M11, which is a really good thing. So pricing is weird, and it's actually hard for me to figure out where this actually fits. I understand that for someone getting into the M11 who wants that power of the M11 but doesn't want to have to hassle with the rangefinder, makes complete sense. This thing I think is pricing just shy of $9,000, $89.95, equivalent of US dollars around the world. But of course, the US right now, we've got tariffs and government shutdowns and all kinds of things going on. And we expect this to be close to a $10,000 camera body only, right? You compare it to whatever the Q3 is, I think $69.95 with a lens, right? So that's a great value compared to the M11, but you do get to use all your Leica lenses if you're a Leica customer and you have a bunch of lenses, so that may not be that big of an upgrade for you. But, you know, you have to wonder at $10,000 for a camera body to get into a new system and then maybe have to go out and buy lenses too. You know, is there a customer for this? And I would say that, you know, every time I think there's not a customer for a certain camera, there seems to be. There aren't many misfires. Certainly Leica knows their customer very well. And if they think people are going to step up for this, it's probably true. But a few questions come to mind. You know, what is the future of Leica rangefinders and the Leica M line in general? And what about the Q line, right? There's a lot of interesting questions that this camera creates as it comes into that line and that kind of family tree of Leica that I think we need to talk about. One of those things is heritage, and in particular the heritage of the M line, right? All the way back to 1932 with Oscar Barnock inventing or maybe perfecting the rangefinder design of cameras, which was what was available then and made by a lot of manufacturers after Leica started producing them. But that design, that rangefinder design, has really been a constant in kind of the heart and soul of Leica, you know, through the M3, the M2, the M4s, you know, M6, M7, M8, all the way up to the current M11 with basically the same function when it comes to the rangefinder and focusing. And for a camera brand to stick with that for so long, as Leica has done, I mean, there's something great about that, and something, really valuable in that heritage of just sticking with this one design when the whole rest of the world's going a different direction, right? To DSLRs and then to mirrorless. And so much to the fact that, there was a point where Leica was on the rocks. They had fallen so far behind the rest of the camera industry by sticking to this one design. In order to catch up on the digital front, they had to do really kind of co-manufacturing deals with Panasonic and Minolta and others to get back up to speed on digital, which they have, and they're in the forefront, particularly with the M11, which I think is the best camera out there that money can buy. It's really a great camera. So I guess the question is, as you bring in some of these other elements into the M11, does it stay this great heritage camera, or does it turn into something a little bit different? That's something that's very interesting to think about. So in this Leica family, right, we've got this M11P, kind of the pinnacle of rangefinder coolness and quality, I think, in the Leica world. I've got this Q3, which is kind of the pinnacle of the fun side of shooting, right? Autofocus, no worries camera. Two great use cases, and now here comes the EV1. It's not right down the center, really. Like the rumors were that this was going to be a combination of M11 and a Q3, and oh my gosh, what's happening? It's not really that at all. It's an M11 with an electric viewfinder. That's what it is. And so as we think about this EV1, it's like, where does this fit? It's not a rangefinder camera. And I don't know, when I look at the lineage of the M's, it's when I put my purist hat on, it's like, oh, why would you call this an M? Call this something new. Call it an R or an S or whatever. But don't call it an M, because the M lineage is all rangefinders all the way back to the beginning. And there's another part of it, that this kind of pride part where, hey, I shoot a rangefinder and I can shoot my rangefinder faster than you can autofocus. I've been doing it so long, I've earned it, right? I have that badge of being a rangefinder photographer, along with tons of other people, right? But there's something about that path it took to get there. And now it's like, oh, we're going to let people just use regular viewfinders with that same camera. And you think, gosh, is that an M, right? Is that an M line camera? I don't know. But because I've had years and years with that rangefinder, there's some pride associated with being a photographer who shoots a rangefinder camera. And does this kind of go around that? Is naming this thing an M exactly right? Another thing I'm not quite sure about. But, when I think about it, maybe that's the point. Maybe it's those years it took to be a great rangefinder photography, and that badge of honor is not a good thing, from a brand perspective for Leica. Maybe they're thinking that there are a lot of people that don't want to spend years and years becoming a great rangefinder photographer. Maybe people want everything that's in the M11, and maybe they want that at an easier access point with an electronic viewfinder. It's interesting because you think about this, being able to look through a viewfinder and see what you're photographing. Okay, that's an SLR camera, right? They've been around forever. It's the same function, manual focus, seeing what you're shooting through the viewfinder. So it's not a new function by any means. And I also think about the other end of things and think, gosh, if there's a customer that wants that convenience of being able to kind of see through the viewfinder, what you see is what you get, wouldn't it have been better to take a Q with an autofocus lens and make that have an interchangeable lens, right? Then you would think that customer who wants the convenience would want, maybe a Q with autofocus with interchangeable lenses, and you leave the M line alone. That actually would be my preference, but I certainly understand that, maybe that the path to getting to that camera is much longer than the path to just adding an electric viewfinder to an M11. I don't know, I'm not a Leica engineer, but I am hearing, something that makes me feel really good, that at all the pre-release events, Leica really went above and beyond to explain that The rangefinder is the heart and soul of Leica, and it's not going anywhere. I think they really went a long way to reassure everybody at those pre-release events that this is just a variation of the M11. It's not a new direction for the M11. I think we'll see. We'll see how this thing sells and see, how popular it gets and what decisions that influences with Leica. But I sure hope that we see that M rangefinder line continue. It's been around for so many years. I hope that, and really kudos to Leica for hanging with it for so long, right? They know it's hard, they know it's limiting, but they also know that's who they are. So they've done a good job keeping their brand together. And, I think I'm fairly convinced they still see the rangefinder as the future and their heart and soul. Where they go from here, I'm not sure. And one has to wonder, right, where all this is heading. Is this testing the waters on removing the rangefinder from one of their premier cameras? Is it just a fluke because, hey, we can get to this point quickly by just putting the Q3 viewfinder in the M11? And that was a quicker path to release. I normally feel like I have a pretty good beat on Leica's strategy, but this one's got me a little bit baffled. Knowing Leica, it's probably going to be a home run. If there's one thing that I've seen is Leica really has a good beat on their customers, and they rarely have a misfire. And, when I look at myself and I say, geez, if I was starting over, right? If I had bought a Q3 and said, ooh, now I want to get to the M11, that's what I want to do. And I had a choice. Would I buy an M11 rangefinder or an M11 with an electronic viewfinder? I'd probably buy the electronic viewfinder M11. I wouldn't care about the heritage of rangefinders because I wouldn't have a collection of M cameras like I do. So I do think that when I take my kind of purist collector's hat off, I see this plainly, right? I would, if I was just getting into M11s, this would be my purchase. The electric viewfinder, hands down. I think, I'm just torn. The purist part of me thinks M11s are M11s with rangefinders. Don't mess with that. And, is not a big fan of this thing. But then again, when I take my purist collector hat off, I'm like, yeah, I would like one of those, and I'd actually like one of those right now. After all, when you think about it, an M11 with an electric viewfinder, it's pretty cool. So I really want to know what you guys think about this. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting one of these to play with. I know they haven't been released yet, but as I watch some of the reviewers that I watch online, it looks like a great thing. I don't think there's really a downside to it. I actually think it's a great improvement for the M11. What it means to the history and all those things, I have to kind of set aside and say, if I was buying one of these today, would I want this? Heck yeah, I'd want it. So, take some time to leave your comments below. The reason I put this up here is just to get a little discussion going on this. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What are your thoughts on this camera? It's a little bit of a kind of a milestone moment for the Leica brand, and I didn't want to pass up giving us the opportunity to talk about it. All right, I hope you had a good day, and we'll see you next time.